This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by Smart Music. Still the trusted way to connect teachers and students, the new Smart Music is in the cloud, so it works with the devices your students have today. Best of all, you can use it for free. Learn more at smartmusic.com. You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 16. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Katie Wardrobe from midnightmusic.com.au, the place for music teachers to get the help they need with using technology in music education. I'm really pleased to say that today I'm actually welcoming my first guest to the podcast. His name is Tim Topham, and Tim is a piano teacher from Melbourne, which is where I also live. So he's one of the people that I actually get to catch up in person with fairly regularly, and it's really good for both of us to be able to do that. Tim has more than 20 years experience teaching, both here in Australia and also in the UK, and he presents regularly at conferences and other events. He shares lots and lots of resources and piano teaching tips on his website, timtopham.com, and through his creative piano teaching podcast. He also has an active online membership community of piano teachers too. In addition to all of that, he's a keen cyclist and has climbed to Mount Everest Base Camp, which I learnt from your website, Tim. So welcome, Tim, to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Katie. That's some good research you've done.
I did my due diligence. Yeah, go on.
Can I just say up front too, what an awesome work that you're doing in the music ed industry and have been doing for so long. I'm really pleased that you've got a podcast together now too, because I know it's going to help so many teachers, as do all your workshops and online tutorials and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for all the great work that you're doing to get tech out in the music industry.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to hear. I'm blushing now. Tim can't tell that because we've turned our videos off to make the internet connection a little bit smoother. So that's really nice. And same with you. You've had your podcast going for quite a lot longer than I have, and that's given me the impetus to actually get mine going. I'm one of those people who thinks a little bit too hard about starting new things, and it takes me ages to get going. And then once I'm doing it, I'm really loving it. So I'm really happy that I have got it going finally this year and get to chat to some people. So yeah. So tell me, what was it like to climb to Mount Everest Base Camp?
Oh, it was quite tough for those who haven't got up there before. Of course, the biggest issue is with acclimatizing to the altitude. And so as soon as you start getting anything over 4 kilometers high, or 3.5 even, in fact, even 3, if you move too fast, you get very severe altitude sickness very, very quickly, headaches, vomiting, all that kind of stuff. So our trick was to move really slowly as we ascended, and I tell you what, it had always been a goal of mine to see Everest with my own eyes and to be up close with it and with all the beautiful people of Nepal was just something I would never forget and would encourage anyone to do. An amazing experience.
Yeah, I think those physical challenges are such a good thing, and just, when I was growing up, when you're a kid and when you hear Everest Base Camp, that phrase, you think that base camp is kind of like really low, like low down. And you go to base camp and you just rock up at base camp. But then I realised after a number of years that base camp itself is a really massive achievement to actually climb that far. So, yeah, it is. Fantastic.
And I give credit to all the people that actually make it to the top or even start that process. It's unbelievable.
Were you worried about, your fingers being too cold and potentially losing any?
No, frostbite wasn't such an issue where we at the levels that we were, because we were close to common trails, and there was accommodation every now and then and that sort of thing. So if we needed help, we could get it. It's more past Everest Base Camp where you're really on your own. And in fact, there's actually a story I read recently about a couple of guys who have recently ascended. I think only one of them made it without oxygen to the top.
Oh my God.
And that is just an incredible feat.
That's crazy.
to be in the atmosphere where jet planes fly without oxygen. Unbelievable thought. So I've only made it a little bit of the way, really, but I'm still proud of that achievement. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I both know we both like to do physical challenges, which are completely different from everything else we do, music and education related. And I laughed because Tim and I actually have connected on the Strava website, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a place where you can log and keep track of running or cycling activities that you do and other physical activities too. And it keeps a track of how far you ran that day or how far you cycled that day and the elevation involved and so on. And I remember you commented after one of my just regular Saturday runs, like, did you just run like a half marathon as a training session this morning? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of what we do in my running crew because we're preparing for a marathon. And but then, by the same token, on your Strava, there's, crazy rides of over 100 kilometres in distance. What can you say?
It's just a great way of boasting about all that you do.
Yeah.
But no one gets to see you collapsing at home and unable to walk for days afterwards.
Yeah.
But you've got the tracked on Strava.
I know. And there is that saying, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. So you have to make sure it goes up there.
Exactly.
Well, today I wanted to talk about just the way that technology fits, into your everyday life. So, that would include teaching piano students and, you've got obviously favourite apps and software that you use regularly. And also from a business point of view, I mean, both you and I run online businesses, largely online businesses, which involved tech tools that improve productivity and that we use for all sorts of areas in our business, and I mean really in every area probably. It's become such a big thing and a big part of life nowadays. So I thought we might cover some of that today in the episode and just see where that takes us. But studio teaching, when I was growing up, I had piano lessons and all sorts of other instrumental lessons growing up, and I just think, man, they've changed so much since I was a kid. My piano lessons, I had some great piano teachers, and but the lessons consisted of me rocking up with my couple of piano books at the time, and we would work through the book pretty systematically, and we would have maybe some theory exercises on worksheets or in books or whatever, and that was about it. And it was a fairly dry, I don't know if that's the right word, dry experience. It was that. It wasn't so as colourful as I would imagine today's lessons to be. So tell us what are the sorts of things that you use today?
I think that style of piano lesson is definitely on the way out because it just doesn't just doesn't make kids respond anymore because it's not really relevant to them. So I'm all for a creative approach to music education, which is what my blogging and podcasting is all about. And so for me, that means a real mix of experiences in a piano lesson. So I would encourage any teachers, in fact, on any instruments, to have kids playing along to backing tracks, to have them exploring pop, to, if they're a pianist, to be understanding how to play from a lead sheet and use chords, how to use chords to compose, how to improvise, how to be curious, how to find answers to your musical questions. Why do I keep listening to that song on Spotify? Would be something that I would love my teenage and adult students to do. Perhaps not so much the younger ones, but I want them to question, what is it about the music that I like, and then go to the piano and try and work out how to play it, and then work out what perhaps the chord progression is, and then be able to use that in their own playing and composing. So these are the kinds of things that I think are changing now. Yeah. About music education generally. And it's what I'm really pushing to help piano teachers do around the world. And I know that for many teachers who've been teaching for a number of years, changes like this can be quite terrifying, in all honesty. And the easiest thing is to do nothing. And so what I try to do with all my resources is provide real sort of hand-holding, step-by-step support, and just putting out ideas. Here's something that's worked in my studio, and here's how I did it. Let me help you try it out if you want to in your studio with your students and see what happens. Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing I've been doing. Aside from technology, that's the new paradigm, I think, in music education today.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and that philosophy matches mine with, you know, the resources that I provide. You know, that the tech is, it can be terrifying. It's still scary for me a lot of days. I mean, if I'm doing something new, I pick up a new piece of software or something, and usually my deadline for learning how to use something is that I'm running a workshop in that thing. So I have to learn it because I'm about to get up in front of a room of people and teach it to them. So I need to know how it works.
And if you teach it, you've got to learn it really well.
You have to learn about, you know, 70% more than you actually will show in the workshop, because there will be those questions or those things that go wrong. And so I think it's so important to take just one tiny thing and get that going and make that work. And as a teacher, you're sort of practicing your use of that technology as well, you know, and you need the practice at doing it and running it with kids and, you know, or adult students, and seeing success with it is the thing that will, you know, give you the confidence to try something else the next day, and then you add to your repertoire. That's what I always think. You just keep adding to your repertoire of tech use.
One of the things I always remind teachers when it comes to technology is that technology is just a tool to achieve some kind of outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for kids don't really care that much about technology anymore, because it's not that exciting necessarily. Although sometimes a new app in a music lesson can be exciting if you've never explored that style of teaching with a student. But on the whole, students are immersed in technology all the time anyway. So it's not so much about whatever app it is, it's about what you're trying to do with that app. And so when it comes for me thinking about technology in the studio, and particularly apps, and that's not the only technology we use, but for apps, it's, you know, what am I trying to get the student to do? For example, one thing that most teachers will do at some stage is teach a student how to read music. And one of the best ways to do that is using what I call an intervallic approach. So it's giving students some guide notes on the stave that they instantly recognize and can play straight away. And then from there, they use intervals to recognize other notes around it. This is in contrast to the way you were probably taught, Katie, and I was taught, which was the every good boy does footy or face and all those kind of things, those mnemonics, right? And so the tool that I would use, what I would then do is look for a tool that the student could practice that at home, and there's some great games. One I can think of off the top of my head which is brilliant, is called Flash Note Derby, and this is the old Flash Note or Flash cards. You know, we don't use them anymore. They're not all that inspiring and they're not that versatile. So there's an app for that, and you can select the notes that the kids get quizzed on, and they effectively participate in a horse race, and the more notes they get right, the more their horse comes first, and that sort of thing. So it's really simple, but again, it's a tool which I use to get the kid to practice learning those guide notes at home when I'm not there.
Absolutely.
And if you can engage them with technology, brilliant.
Yeah, I love that one too. I put together a list of lots of different note identification apps and software and stuff, and that's definitely in there too. And it's got a lot of flexibility with the parameters that you can choose for your students, and you can even save the setup, can't you? So if your student's literally only done 5 notes, you can save that little setup for that group of students or single student, and they just get tested on those ones, which is great. I love it's one of the only ones that does the grand staff, I think, across, you know, both bass and treble clef at the same time.
Yeah, you know, there's one other called Music Flash Class. Have you heard of that one?
No, I have not. That's a new one to me.
It's kind of groovy too if you're playing in groups or you're teaching groups, because they've got this hot potato feature. So the new note flashes up and you have to choose it and then throw the phone or pass it to the next person. Meanwhile it counts down and, you know, it will unexpectedly explode.
Oh, that sounds cool.
So you don't want to be holding it while that happens. So you've got to choose your thing quickly and pass it on.
Oh, hang on, what's it called again? Music Flash?
Music Flash Class.
Okay.
Yeah, groovy little app.
Oh, that's great. That sounds real. I would like that. I know some kids would get very stressed with that, but generally speaking, it would be quite fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Star Force is another one I love, but it only kind of does one stave at a time. But that one's also a great one. It's a great sort of middle school age student app, because it's very, you know, Star Wars kind of themed and kind of fun like that. Yeah,
and Ningenius you're probably familiar with. That's another one.
Ningenius, yeah.
good for the tweens and early teens
Yeah,
too.
exactly. Something that appeals to everybody. Yeah, and just going back to your point about the technology, using the technology in the first place, again, it's I think you're right. It's so important to think of what you want to achieve first. I get a lot of teachers who come to me and they say, right, I've got GarageBand. What do I do? Or
Yes.
I've got an iPad. What do I do with it in class? And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to actually teach the students? What do you want to achieve? And if they say, well, okay, film scoring or composition generally or songwriting, and then you go, okay, well, here are the ways you could use GarageBand to achieve that. And sometimes you might find really the technology is not going to enhance or help that thing. So my response to that is don't use it. So, you've got to kind of weigh that up all the time, I think. That's excellent.
Yeah.
So
and GarageBand's one of those great ones that I use for composing.
Yes.
So I love teaching students to compose chord progressions. And I think I do this because I love chord progressions.
Yeah.
I've always been a real chordal player.
Yeah.
But playing a chord progression, so, I mean, they could do that over and over a few times, and that's fun. But to then add some orchestration, well, then that brings things to life, and they can then play along with their own backing track. The simplest way to do that, GarageBand, in my opinion. So
absolutely.
There's
So
the
good.
result. There's the tool you use.
Yeah. Do you think that chordal approach, this is piano teaching as well as tech related, but that chordal approach, your teaching of chord progressions and improvisation and sort of composition techniques as well, is that something that's more prevalent, do you think, in piano teaching lessons nowadays? I mean, it's not something I ever did in my lessons. I always feel like I had two lots of music education, and there was one lot of education in the lessons that I went to, whether that was at school, sort of general class music, or whether that was private studio lessons. And then I had my second education, which was everything I did at home by myself. And that was the stuff that I did at home. And I actually think the home stuff, I mean, I loved the piano lessons and everything else, and they progressed me in a certain way. But realistically, probably my biggest learning curve was in the things I did at home on my own. And that's how I got all my ear training skills up to such a good level, because I transcribed stuff from recordings all the time. And the chordal approach, I did that a lot at home, but never did it in a lesson. It was all very much reading the notes on the stave, and on the sheet music, I should say. But the chordal approach was much better for pop music, and yeah, I loved doing that.
Yeah, I think it's the same for a lot of teachers our age and perhaps older as well, in that a lot of us learnt still in that traditional classical way, but on the side we were perhaps accompanying school musicals or local theatre, or we were playing for church services and we had to do hymns or modern music, or we played in a band or whatever it was, and that was the way that we learnt to understand lead sheets and chord progressions and things like that. My biggest passion and mission in all the work that I'm doing today is to change the concept of piano pedagogy from this tradition of reading, interpretation, performance, memorization to one that is far more holistic and includes this. So my feeling is that it's changing, and teachers are beginning to come on board with a more creative approach, and that includes chords and lead sheets and pop music. But we've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And there's still many, many parts of the world where this isn't even thought of, I think. So I think we've got a long way to go, but we're starting the movement in the right direction, and we can see a groundswell beginning.
I think it's a great thing. It's such a great thing. I mean, that was really the motivational part for me. That was what kept me going for a lot of stuff to do with music. And so in addition to GarageBand, creating backing tracks, say, or recording chord sequences, I mean, obviously GarageBand is not the only option there. There's lots and lots of different apps and software on a laptop that you could use to do that sort of thing. So Soundtrap is a great option if you are on a PC or a Mac laptop, and it's an online program which you can access from pretty much any device. What else do you use technology for in that regard? Is there anything else with the creative side of things?
Actually, just before that, there's one thing that's often overlooked, I think, in music studios, particularly piano ones, and that's a digital piano. A lot of us teach with a real piano and a digital. Some of us have two pianos, whatever it is. But I think a lot of the time when students are playing something, on a second, I've just got a simple digital piano. It's not expensive. It's maybe $2.5 grand worth. A Roland I happen to use at the moment. And I'll just play, I'll put it on a string sound and I'll just play along. So I had a student, one of my boys yesterday was playing Mad World.
Oh, I love that song.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Great. It's basically a 3-chord song.
Yeah, I love it.
I can't remember, right? And so while he was playing on the piano, I was just doing some strings and bass sound and just playing along. And that's a really simple use of technology. So I think it's important to realize that technology doesn't necessarily mean laptops and iPads and all that kind of stuff. It can actually be some of those things that we have in our studios that we might not really remember could be used in these ways. So
yeah, that's great.
I wanted to mention that, and YouTube as well, of course.
Oh,
you
yeah.
You don't need to buy anything to use YouTube. Great resource for us all, right?
God, oh, it's unbelievable. I saw recently, I just showed my kids yesterday, this young girl, she's learnt, there's a style of dance called dubstep dance, and it's very fluid. It's Michael Jackson style of kind of the moonwalk thing, where the dancer looks like they're floating and there's lots of popping involved and that sort of thing. Hard to describe via audio. Anyway, but she's an amazing dancer. She's only 12, I think 11 or 12 years old herself, and she's learnt the entire style by watching YouTube videos. And there's a little interview that, a package that they've put together of her. Basically, she says she's watched hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos until she could work out how they did, one aspect of the dance, and then she just practiced and did it herself. So,
wow.
I know, it's just amazing.
It goes the same for learning any skill,
anything,
instrumental or not, right?
Yeah.
That's where I go if I've got a problem with my website.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I'll Google it, and chances are someone will have recorded a YouTube video about it. And so we've got to be mindful. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
We've got to be mindful in music to not denounce people who learn something off a YouTube tutorial too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is what kids do, right?
I know. And I love them. I mean, at the moment, I'm actually learning myself. I'm trying to set myself a little musical challenge semi-regularly because I just find I don't actually play really anymore. I'm not in a musical group at the moment, so I have no specific reason to practice anything. So, and I miss it, so I set little challenges for myself, and it might be using a live looper and, sort of setting up an arrangement and learning how to put that down and to perform it seamlessly with the live looping app that I use. And the other thing I'm doing at the moment is using YouTube videos to learn how to play this little African, I think it's African, shaker instrument anyway, called various names, but asalata or asalato or asalatois, I think is another pronunciation. And it's like two shakers, two little gourds which are joined together with a piece of string, and you hold one of those in each hand and you shake and flick them back and forth and they clack against each other. And the people on YouTube who can do it really well look amazing. Like, they are so cool, and I need to know how to do it. So I'm watching, tutorial videos essentially on YouTube of how to do this. And I mean, it's really hard, but they're all there.
How dare you not go to a teacher to show you how to do it properly?
I know, exactly. And unfortunately, I don't know anyone in Australia. Well, there's probably someone in Australia who uses them quite well, but I don't know anyone locally. And so this is the thing, it opens it up for anybody who's anywhere who may not have access to a teacher. And I know that some of the most popular YouTube channels are the keyboard-based ones, the ones, which are the latest pop song, Learn to Play. I mean, I don't cope with it. My brain doesn't cope with the, how they use the software where it shows the piano keyboard and it shows like Guitar Hero style. Down. Yeah, like which keys you're going to press. I mean, that just does my head in. I just don't think like that in a musical way. And I know some people do, and that's fine. It's the same as I don't think in guitar fretboard either. I can't think in guitar fretboard. I think in keyboard layout, if I'm imagining chords, I don't picture the shape on a guitar fretboard. I picture it as my fingers on the keyboard. So, but they are. It's another whole teaching style. It's truly amazing. And do you have students that are learning things that way and maybe coming to classes with you and saying, "Hey, I've learnt this thing because I watched a YouTube video,"
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really easy to wonder as a teacher what to do with that. apart from saying, "Oh, that's nice.
Great.
Let's go back to our technique."
Yeah, I was going to say,
and what I'd say is that the simplest thing to do is help the student make it. There's a few options. Help them make it musical, because oftentimes they'll learn it in a very clunky, robotic kind of way, because that's what the tutorials do. So helping them make it musical, adding dynamics, moving around the piano a little bit more, changing the structure of it. So can they add an intro to it or add an outro? These are the kinds of things that teachers know intuitively, because we're musicians. We've got good ears. So don't let the fact that they've learned something on YouTube stop you giving them input into it. And you don't need to spend the whole lesson on it. I'd say if a student has brought in and wants to play me something that they've learned on YouTube, I'd be great. Fantastic. Let's spend 5 minutes on it. And then, you know what? I'd love for you to keep going on that. Try out some of the things that I've shown you. And now let's hear how you went with your repertoire from last week, and then you're back onto what you want to do, but you've done a little bit of what they want to do. So they they'll work with you, and students really understand, and they respect teachers who are open to working with them and helping them learn something they want to do. And they'll realize that, oh, there's a bit of give and take here. Okay, I'll now do what I know that I need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, YouTube can be great for, or sort of stuff that they listen to generally can be great for inspiration as well. I mean, I've talked to you about my kids having learnt piano in the past, and they've sort of stopped at the moment because they're focusing on sport activities, much to my disappointment, and yours when you met one of them last week.
That's right.
But they initially, my eldest son Jamie, he was wanting to learn how to play pop songs, and it's really funny. A couple of people told him, "No, that's too difficult. You shouldn't. You shouldn't be tackling that piece." And it was actually, one of them was what's it called? I'm going to forget now. What's it called? Oh, anyway,
Living in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that one. That's it. It's got a crazy piano riff that basically goes through most of the piece. And it's really difficult. It's actually like, I tried to play it and I had a lot of trouble, doing it smoothly and continuously for multiple bars. I mean, there's difficult patterns, but he was so determined, and he could play, after a while. It's all semiquavers, and he could get the first couple of bars down. And, and I'm sort of saying, maybe this fingering might help you a little bit rather than crossing your fingers over and getting tied up in knots.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing that a teacher can do when a student comes in having learned something by rote, which is what they're doing. Give them that feedback and help them practice it slower. Or
yeah, and the other one that inspired him was, of course, he heard his cousin, who's older, play Ferrellis, great, awesome, when he was quite young, and so he wanted to learn to play that, and he did. He actually worked most of it out by ear, the right hand part, and then I said to him, look, here's what the left hand does, and he added that in over time, and then he went to lessons, and he could play the whole first section. And then one day we were watching a YouTube video, and he realised there was another whole part to it, that whole second section, which is, again, quite difficult. And he went, I now want to learn that bit. And he was about 9, I think, at the time. And I said, all right, let's give it a go. In my mind, I was thinking it's going to be hard, but I thought, no, I'm not going to tell him that. What the hell? If he wants to give it a go, let him have a go at it. And
absolutely,
the inspiration from kids on YouTube, particularly kids being able to watch other kids, is fantastic, I think, too.
Well, they definitely find it inspiring.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before about creativity in apps too.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about a couple that I use, and one of them you can actually use with technical work and the scales. So it's a good little crossover one, and that's called Music Clock. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
No, I'm not. This is good. I'm learning something.
Oh, okay. Definitely check this one out. So MUSI Clock.
Yep.
It works on a circle of fifths. So the thing that will show up first is the circle of fifths, and you can kind of spin your hand around to choose what key you want. I use it because the backing tracks in it are really cool. And so you can choose a key. In fact, I might even be able to, let me grab it up on my thing right now.
Nothing like instantaneous.
This is great. So let's say that a kid knows a D major scale. What you can do, instead of just getting him or her to play the D major scale, is you can put on a little backing track. So something like this. Oh wait, no, that's not a cool backing track. Let me try this one. Can you hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a groovy one of their backing tracks in this app. It's called Venice Beach Vibes. Like, I love that kind of music. It's like down-tempo house music. So they could play their scale along to that. And kids love this because it's using music that they understand. They get pop music. It's innate. It's natural. So they, rather than put a metronome on, you want them to play in time, put on a backing track like that has a beat. And get them to play along to it.
I'll tell you what, I've banged on about this in a lot of workshops actually as well, and that's exactly how I frame it. I say, rather than putting a metronome on, here are 7 different other options for you to use technology with and make it cool. So in going back to the GarageBand app on the iPad, they've got heaps of different ways you can make a drum pattern, but one of them is the smart drums, and you basically drag sounds, as in parts of the kit, into the grid, and it will instantly play a pre-made pattern for you, and you can set up a really groovy pattern within about 10 seconds or less, I think. And I love that because this is what I say to the teachers, in the workshops. You could have this instead of a metronome, just a funky beat. That's kind of cool. Or get it to go along with your classroom ensemble thing that you're doing. Maybe you're doing some sort of ORF or Kodai thing, and that could be the accompaniment, that keeps going and keeps the kids in time while you're singing with them or playing with them. And it's such a great way. And again, you can just set up quick backing tracks yourself using chord options in GarageBand app or any of those sort of, apps or software that you can set up, digital audio workstations where you can set up chord sequences, and it's so much more fun. It's so much more interesting than the metronome. And again, going back to my childhood and probably yours too, that was all we had, and it was the old-fashioned click clack back and forth metronome as well. And it's so much more fun.
Yeah, and I should mention too that in all my approaches and things that I do, I do everything in a mix. So I'm not advocating we only use technology and we only play chord progressions and we only do pop. I would never say that. It's about having these tools available when you need them to grab them out. So I think there is purpose or a point in getting students to be able to play along to a metronome. I don't think there's any issue with that. It's just that it might not be the best way for one of your students who's struggling to stay in time to feel the beat. And so if you keep using a metronome and you're banging your head against a wall and the student's not getting it, then here's an opportunity to try something different.
Yeah,
but for perhaps your higher skilled classical musicians, well, of course you wouldn't use a drum pattern necessarily. You'd use the metronome, and that's okay too. So I just want to let people know that I'm not an advocate for changing everything you do in your lessons to just be pop and tech and all this kind of stuff. It's about having these tools available when you need them and being confident in their use.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to that thing, use it if it's going to help or enhance or teach something in a way that you couldn't, and otherwise leave it out of the mix. And I think that's really good. And variety also is a really good thing anyway, just generally. So having tech involved with some parts of the lesson, like you said, it would be too much to have something like that going all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Another 2 little ones that I'll just mention now, read creativity. You mentioned looping. I'm sure you know Loopy.
Yeah, which is the one that I love.
It was the app that was made very popular by Billy Joel on that talk show.
Yeah, Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon's used it quite a lot, actually. He's done a number of things with different famous people.
Yeah, I used it. A kid recorded, I don't know, he made up a bass line that went something like... a 3-note little bass line. He had some groove, this guy. In fact, he was a bass player as well. And so we chucked that on loop, and then we thought, right, can we do some chords along with that? And could we sing along to it? Whatever else it is. So looping apps are quite fun to use, and kids do find them quite engaging.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I love that one in particular is that I come from a background of singing in a cappella groups, and Loopy allows me to be the entire a cappella group on my own, so I don't have to rely on people turning up for rehearsals and stuff, when you get really frustrated with that. So you go, I'll just do it all myself. Yeah, Loopy's fantastic in it, and it just allows you to build those layers over and over and over, and you can keep adding. And I find it a fantastic improvisation tool. You know, you can just layer a loop and record that first one, and then you can just play freely over that thing that you've recorded in the first place, and then maybe record that as a second loop. And yeah, it's just great to build it up.
And the last one I'll mention just on creativity, because I know the other thing that's really easy for us to do, Katie, is to give people too many ideas and just overwhelm them. And then people just go, that's it. I'm not worrying about this. Nothing. I'm going back to my theory book. So I'm just going to give you 3 in regard to creativity. So we've talked about MusicLock and Loopy, and the other one is iReal Pro. iReal space Pro, weird name for an awesome app. It's kind of based on the lead sheets. No, what's it called? The Real Book concept. Mm-hmm. And this is great for any teacher. So if you teach flute, violin, whatever it is, if you've got students that like to do something popular, jazzy, something that works really well with a backing track, with a bass and a drummer and a pianist, then this is a brilliant app. It's less than $20, and it pretty much what it does is takes a chord progression that you literally write in or upload from thousands on the forums, and it just creates a simple backing track to that chord progression, and you can select the style, whether it's a kind of Caribbean or funk or disco or jazz. You just press play, you set the key and the time signature and the speed, and voila, you've got a backing track. Fantastic for jazz and blues and all that kind of stuff for any instruments. I love it. It's really, really good.
I've used that quite a bit just to sing along with, you know, jazz standards and that sort of thing. And I love the fact that you can take out different instruments from the accompaniment as well. So I think it has keys in there, doesn't it, if you want it to? And then you can actually remove them if you want to, or add
and you can change the volume levels of all of them.
Yes.
And one click, change the key. Great for singers.
Yeah.
Really good for singers. Yeah.
Yeah, no more complaints from the band.
That's right. Literally 2 clicks and you can load in, it's about 1,000 pop songs and about 500 jazz standards straight from the forums, and you're in there. You just press play and you're ready to go. It's really, really good.
Really good. Yeah, I love these things that are available to us now. It's made a lot of my music library redundant. It's kind of like recipe books. You know, you keep all these recipe books, and then as soon as you need a recipe for something, you just go and search online for it anyway. And I'm like, why am I keeping all these recipe books? So I've actually given away a lot now. But my music library is becoming quite similar. You know, and I've got some of those real books or fake books or whatever they were called, and kind of thinking, you know, I don't really use them anymore. I just go straight to my iPad and use iReal Pro.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I opened up a fake book or a real book.
I know. A bit redundant. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by Smart Music. Smart Music is the music learning platform that allows teachers to connect with students as they practice. It makes it easy to create individualised assignments, hear student recordings, and provide specific guidance. Smart Music also empowers students by providing them with immediate feedback, both in terms of rhythm and pitch. This feedback transforms practice from passive repetition to active learning. The new Smart Music brings these resources into the cloud, so they work with Chromebooks, iPads, and other devices your students use today. Best of all, you can use it for free with limited repertoire, or access the full Smart Music library with an affordable pricing model that can be customised to fit any sized program. Learn more at smartmusic.com. And what about performance side of things? You know, I'm sure you've been doing, you know, recitals or performances with students in the past. Has technology had an influence there in the way that you do things?
Yeah, so one thing, and I'm writing next month, depending on when this goes live, May on my blog and podcast has a focus on pop music. And one of the things that I'm writing about and having a podcast episode about, and in fact I'll do a webinar later in the year, is about running a pop piano concert.
Excellent.
And this is for piano students in your studio who love pop music and have been learning some pop. The concept is really, really simple. Instead of getting them up in the midst of a classical piano recital, which really has a very different feel. You have a separate recital for them, and you hire a bass player, a drummer, and a guitarist, and you train them up to be able to play along with the group, which is how pop music should be enjoyed and performed, right? And I tried this last year. And I did it really quite simply. It was just after school, at the school that I was teaching at. I used other teachers for the instrumentalists. We had one rehearsal, and then we brought the parents in, and it was such a great experience. And there's 2 apps which I used because one of the things that piano students often aren't very good at is playing with other people. We're a real soloist instrument, right? We sit in our little studios and do our own thing all the time. So this is another great reason why this is such a good learning experience for students, because they get to play along with other instruments. They've got to communicate. They've got to, use eye language and contact with other people. It's fantastic. But to get them ready to do that, there's 2 apps I use. One of them we've already mentioned, iReal Pro. Brilliant for that. The second one is called NoteStar by Yamaha. Are you familiar with this one,
I am.
Katie?
I've had a bit of a look at it, but not recently. But I've heard it's an excellent one.
Yeah, so NoteStar, it's a free app, and you pay for any sheet music that you download and backing tracks you download into it. And what it does is it provides backing tracks for a lot of popular music, but not just backing tracks. Most of the tracks also include the vocals. And this is what sets it apart from most other apps and iReal Pro. A student who perhaps isn't a strong singer and doesn't want to sing can accompany a singer on the original track. So I should clarify that. It's not the original singer. They've remade the vocals.
Yep.
Yeah. but the tracks are high quality. They sound really good. So one of my students at the Pop Piano Jam we did played Billy Joel's Piano Man. And Piano Man is on NoteStar, so we loaded it up. And he got used to the fact that actually he's got to keep in time. He's not just playing a solo anymore. And we turned off the vocals because he actually sang. And I really support and encourage my students to sing when they're learning pop music. So he had this fantastic experience of playing with a band using an app before he actually got to our first rehearsal with the band. So he knew what to expect, and he was already playing in time and that sort of thing.
Fantastic.
So that's one of the great ways that tech can be used for performing or preparing for performance.
And I think that would also, there's one aspect I find with playing, pop stuff, and I do it myself sometimes, is that when you're at home and you're playing by yourself, like you said, you practice the verse a lot, you practice the chorus a lot, and you can join them together quite well, but you you rarely practice the intro from the beginning, all the sections in order right through to the end of the song with an outro. And then if you get together with other band members, that's the thing where you kind of go, oh, that's right, we've got to do an outro. What are we going to do at the end here? And to be able to do that with the help of that app or something like it would be great. Really good practice just to keep going through sections and to not stop and you've got some other people that you're playing with. So,
and I've in fact used that app as a backing track for a recital. So letting students just play along with that. You don't even need to do the whole pop piano concert with the live band. If you've just got one kid that's learnt a pop song, as I did at my last school, he learnt that Daft Punk song that came out 3, 4, 5 years ago, really popular. Anyway, it was on there, had the vocals. So he was on stage. He was the cool piano guy who played along to the backing track on stage using NoteStar. So highly recommend that one as well. It's an iPad only, I'm afraid, app.
Unfortunately. Yeah. And with the recitals, do you use much other sort of equipment and stuff? I mean, pianos, if it's a real piano, generally don't need so much, miking up or anything. Obviously, the band members would have, and you would have had some sort of amplification, sound system set up, I guess, for all of that. What sort of equipment do you use there?
For the piano concert, we had a PA, so the students who were singing could be heard above the band. The bass player and guitarist brought their own gear, and so they had their own amps and things, so they were pretty much self-contained. And the only gear I've used for recitals is if a student is singing, and I've had a few do that. So having a mic and a simple PA, you can get those all in one kind of box PAs, which you just plug a microphone into, and they're pretty good for, unless you're trying to fill a stadium, they're totally fine for small recitals. Other than that, and the odd backing track, I haven't used a huge amount in my recitals to date.
Yeah, that's great, which is a good thing. You can keep things quite simple and still achieve what you need to achieve there.
Yeah, that's right. Also, I should say one student did perform to a garage band backing track that he'd created.
Yeah,
so
cool.
he wrote a song using that, and so we plugged that through the PA. Oh, that's the other thing I should say too, is anytime any students are using an iPad or some kind of device in a lesson and it's outputting sound, you know what I'm going to say? Use an amplifier of some sort, right?
Absolutely.
Use external speakers, preferably with a sub, right?
Yeah,
I've got
I know.
just behind me a Logitech old computer system. It's got to be 15 years old or something, but it's got a separate subwoofer. And I tell you what, that makes all the difference for cool pop sound, because you get a bit of a thumping beat and kids love it. So whatever you do, please, teachers, don't try and use the output of an iPad or a tablet sound system.
And I think, I make a point of also mentioning that in workshops, if you're using your iPad for presenting, and I mean, it goes for your laptop too, if you're presenting something from your device, well, sometimes you might need the screen to be seen, so you need to put that on a data projector, and that's one thing. But a lot of teachers do not realise that they also need to plug in some kind of sound system. You have to. It's just the necessity there, because you just won't hear it. I've had teachers in the past. We've been doing workshops, and they're like, "Can we do like an iPad band type thing?" And I'm not a massive fan of that, everybody playing an instrument on their iPad. I'd sort of prefer the real instruments, but it can be quite useful if you want to play something that you don't have access to, like a Chinese erhu, I think that's how you pronounce it, is one of the instruments in GarageBand, for instance. You can play that if you really want to. And I mean, it makes a great sound too. They've done a really good job with it. But, like even with a group in a workshop, you're not going to hear all the parts of everybody's iPad because it's just not loud enough. And especially if someone's doing a solo type line over the top of everyone else, and someone's doing some drum beat and trying to keep the rhythm for the group, and even that's difficult because it can be hard to hear the percussive element. And therefore, the group, unless you've got someone waving their arms out the front, they might lose their way a little bit. But, it's a good lesson. You will only do it once and then realise that it's not a good thing and go and fix that issue. And I should just mention, I've been thinking about this in the past. Lots of teachers I see, there's a big Facebook group called Music Teachers, and there's over 20,000 people in that group. It's a fantastic place to go and ask a question if you've, got a general music education question to ask of colleagues. And great place to get feedback on things. But a lot of the time there are a few recurring questions that pop up, and it's like a pattern. I can see the same ones pop up, every month. There'll be the Bluetooth speaker question, which is what I was getting to. And, lots of teachers use Bluetooth speakers as an option for amplifying iPads and laptops. And I don't know about you, but I am just not a fan of it. I am not a fan of it.
No, I discourage it.
Oh,
yeah,
it's
too unreliable.
Too risky. It's way too risky.
Yeah, 100%. It's very convenient, but no.
I use it at home. My kids each have a little Bluetooth speaker, and they are emoji-shaped Bluetooth speakers. So one of them has the smiley face with the sunglasses on. The other one has something different. Maybe I don't know if I should share it on the episode, you can probably guess it. It's the emoji poo, and it's hilarious.
My niece
my gosh,
lots of emoji poo cushions and pillows. I don't get it.
I know. Even my kids have renamed their iPads. So if I ever plug them into my laptop or something and I see the name of their iPad, it says Jamie's iPad, and it's got all of these emoji poos and stuff after the time.
Isn't that funny?
But yeah, I am not a massive fan of the Bluetooth thing. I mean, I think maybe the technology will change, but I just find it's just a little bit too risky. So I would maybe use it, in a private lesson, you've got one student there. Absolutely, that's not a big deal. But if you're in that performance scenario where you need things to kind of go right, I would be plugging things in with wires, with cables, and doing it that way. And it's not hard to do. You just need to if you've got, like me, I use Spotify a lot on my phone, and, I've got the newer iPhone, the iPhone 7, so it hasn't got the separate headphone, thingy, what's it, spot. So, of course, you just have to go and buy another Apple dongle, a little adapter thing of some.
Very clever,
I've got so many of them, it's ridiculous. But, I've had to buy two, one for the car and one for in the house. But, you just need to make sure you've got one of those, and it's a much safer option, I think, for recitals and things.
And just finishing up on recitals, I actually interviewed Shana Kirk, who's a consultant about music technology, a bit like you, I guess, over in the States. And I interviewed her for my podcast. You're welcome to link to it if you want, because April this month, as we're recording this, is my recitals and concerts month.
Oh, good.
And so she came on to talk about tech in concerts. And one of her simple ideas was actually using a projector to project video imagery up while students play. And you're probably aware that there's a few apps that actually listen to the sound input from the microphone on the device and create these simple video graphics. And even Ludovico Einaudi, who I saw perform live, he's a great film composer, as you're probably aware. He had just on the back wall huge, great video projections of stuff. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's absorbing somehow. And to add a little video element to any recital really helps, because we're also visual these days, and particularly you want to keep the parents engaged too, right? And so if they can look at something while they're listening, really, really good.
Especially if they have to sit through a lot of performances. I think we're always pretty good as musicians. I feel sorry for people who have kids that are into dance, because those dance recitals seem to be like 4 hours long, and they conveniently schedule your child near the beginning and also at the end in the group item. And so you have to stay for the. I have my mum goes along to see my nephews and nieces are doing that sort of thing, so she gets to sit through. She doesn't mind so much, but we're a bit kinder in the music area, I think. Now we're getting on in time. I was going to, we were going to sort of talk about business. I mean, both of us are running online businesses and using tech in our everyday lives there. But maybe you can just share one favourite productivity related tech tool or resource or website that you use every day. I mean, I know that we both use tech all the time in this area.
Oh, it's so hard to come down. You're going to restrict me to one.
You can have a couple if you want.
All right, I'll give you two. And I know you're a fan of the first one, which is Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google everything, right?
I know. I have that love-hate relationship with it in a way, because, I'm sure it's gathering all sorts of data from me, but I'm too entrenched in it all now. I can't stop.
But you know what? They simplify things so much. And I just mentioned one use of this for teachers. If you have multiple teachers in a studio, or you work with other people, or you ever need to share documents with other people, if you're still attaching them to emails, sending them off, expecting someone to update them, save them to their computer, and then reattach and send back, then
please don't do that anymore.
You are wasting your time. Just get it on a Google Doc. It's all free. Just Google Docs. You'll find it, right? Put it in a Google Doc and you can simply share it with people. And you can have multiple people editing this document at the same time. You can even see where they're typing and what they're typing live. It's ridiculously clever and such a great collaboration tool. So please, 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 if you're wasting time emailing and attaching, get on Google
I'm
Docs.
Actually looking at a Google Doc right now. It's what I do all my podcast episode outlines in.
My podcast notes on as well.
So I have them on a separate screen. And I started using that in when I was working for Sibelius. We were using Google Docs because everybody that worked for Sibelius in Australia at the time, and it wasn't a big team. There was about, I don't know, I want to say maybe 8 people, but we were all in different states in Australia. So we had, someone in in Sydney, James Humberstone, who you probably knows, and I was in Melbourne, and, you know, we had a couple of people in Adelaide, and we had online meetings or Skype meetings together. And so we had our agenda and minutes and everything in a Google Doc, and it was fantastic. And someone would take the minutes and you could watch them being typed into the document as you're going. And then you could pipe up with, that is not what that person said. You know?
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's great. And I think it's also really good, again, getting back to that Music Teachers Facebook group. I mean, people are also sharing ideas or resources in that way too. So you can share, if you're happy to, you can share a Google document that you've set up with, you know, maybe a list of YouTube videos that are great for teaching improvisation, for instance, and you could set a list of those up in a Google Doc with links to the YouTube videos, and then, you know, share them with anyone that you like to share them with. So maybe in that Facebook group, and I know people are doing that, and then other people can contribute to the list as well. So you're crowdsourcing the information at the same time, and it's just such a time saver. And yeah, I used to use Evernote quite a bit, but I've really moved away from Evernote now because Google Drive is just so useful. And even the search aspect in Google Drive, like I'm really tossing up whether it's necessary to file things into folders anymore electronically, because the search function is so good. You know, as long as you are consistent in the way you label files or include words in the file that you're going to be able to find in the future, you know, as long as you do that, you can easily search for it. So I have naming conventions and stuff like that in use, and it's really good.
The advantage of the folders is, though, that you can share a whole folder, and whatever you chuck in that folder will be shared with the same people. So that's one advantage of folderizing.
Yes, I learned that. Well, not the hard way, but yes. I work as you do. You know, we both, each of us have people that work for us that are not in the same country as us. We have sort of virtual assistants that do work for us, and that's the way, I mean, you probably do the same thing. That's the way we work. We have a shared Midnight Music folder, and it's great. Anything I drag into that folder is instantly accessible with the people who have access to that folder. And it's funny, the only drawback of using Google Documents at times when you do want to share is that you need to know where to change the sharing permission, you know, and the access permission for that document. But if you just put it in a folder and you've given the person access to that folder, that just solves all those problems. You can just keep dragging documents in there and not have to worry about the individual ones, I found. So yeah, so that's been really, really
And
good.
so you've taken, just before we run out of time, you've taken my second one, which was Dropbox or Google Drive. The same, you know, either of those two devices for sharing files regularly with people. So for teachers, you know, maybe you're sharing a circle of fifths diagram or a scale worksheet. Stop emailing them these individual things, because you've got to go in, you've got to attach it, you've got to find it, all that kind of stuff. Just with Dropbox or Google Drive, you can find the folder where it's labeled, where it's stored, grab the link to it and just send them the link, and or send them the link to the folder that you put all their stuff in, or maybe they have their own folder. You know, the limits are endless when it comes to simplifying sharing of things, I think.
Dropbox, I use daily too. And from a musical point of view, I had a Dropbox folder which was shared with the a cappella group that I was singing in a few years ago. And, the
ones that never turned up.
Yeah, well, only one maybe. No, that's not true. I hope they don't listen to this.
Your solo a cappella group.
Yeah. I mean, we had this folder, and at the time Dropbox was fairly new. So, you know, I described it to them as the magic portal. So anything I drag in at my end appears for them at their end, and anything they drag into the folder appears for me at my end. And it's just such a great way. And it just meant no more emailing attachments. I mean, it's rare that I email attachments to anyone or receive them. In fact, you know, it's mostly links to things now, and it does make life a lot easier.
And you know what? One other massive bonus about using Dropbox is that if you store all your documents in it, you'd never have to back up your computer anymore.
Yeah, I've been saying
because
that
it's automatically backed up.
Yeah, I say that too. Yeah. Tim and I
please
do that. I know. Tim and I have both been presenting at a series of conferences here in Australia. One day music tech education conferences called Daytime, and we've got a couple left. I know you and I are both going to be at the New Zealand one in June, if that's still happening in the future when you're listening to this podcast. And yeah, I'm actually running this year. I kind of of threw in an idea of running a session about productivity for music teachers. And I mean, all the tips really can apply to anybody, but I thought, I don't know if anyone's interested in this. And that session has been packed every time I've done it.
Yeah, and totally.
Yeah, one of the things is, it's all of these sorts of tips. It's using Dropbox and, there's a few other things, but that's again something that I've been saying in that session too. And Dropbox can be a great backup option for documents. And I do that. I store most of my important stuff. I actually say to the group, most of my intellectual property related stuff. So things that I'm creating, which is workshop outlines or podcast episode outlines and contents, like content like course materials and session notes and, plans for video tutorials that I'm going to do. All of that lives in Dropbox. So I know that it's in another place. It's not going to be, it doesn't mean that it's 100% totally secure, but hey, it's there. It's also on a hard drive on my desk as well. And it's also on my local laptop hard drive. And so it's in multiple places. And I just feel like, okay, it's a little bit safer than just having it in one spot, which might be, on your local hard drive, which is dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much for today. It's been great. I knew that we could potentially talk for hours, I'm sure, as we do. Tim and I get ready.
When we get together yeah. Glass of wine and us talking
or coffee.
Tech.
Sometimes it's brunch.
That's right.
And then we talk and an hour or two flies by and then, time's up. And it's funny, even though we've been presenting at these same conferences throughout the year, we rarely get to talk at those. So we end up having to make other session times. Well, I've been flying in and flying out of these things on the one day and not staying overnight. So, so I'm dashing in and out a little bit, but it is great when we do get to catch up because you find that it's that thing, of being a music teacher or a music teacher and an online business owner, as both of us are, you need to talk to people who know your world. And it can be quite isolating as a music teacher, I think, at times, because you might be the only one at your school or the only piano teacher maybe at your school or the only music teacher full stop at your school. And it's so important to connect with other people at events or just get together one-on-one with people and chat. And that's how, you and I share lots of tips and have you heard of this latest thing? And we find out lots of really useful stuff at these and can save time in the future. So I really
totally
like it. Yeah, it's really great. So I will have a list of links of things that we've mentioned in today's episode. If there's an appropriate link, I'll add that too. But all the apps and everything else that we've mentioned, plus the couple of podcast episodes of Tim's that he's mentioned, and I'll put that on the show notes page. Thank you so much again, Tim, and I'll look forward to seeing you at our next event that we're doing together.
Absolute pleasure, Katie, as always, to hang out. And if you like, I'll give you a link to for your piano teachers who are listening, my top apps for piano teachers, which is one of my most popular blog posts. So I'm happy to share that too.
Please. Yep, do that. Do you want to read it out now? And then I'll also include it in the show notes. Have you got it handy?
I'm trying to think if it's got a short link or not. It's really easy to find on my website. If you go to Tim Topham, and that's TimTopham.com, you can very easily find it if you do a quick search for iPad or app or something like that. Excellent. But we'll find the link and I'll share it with you in the show notes.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. Thanks,
Great.
Tim.
You're welcome,
and have
Katie.
a good day.
See you later.
See you then.
Bye.
The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/15. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.